Nintendo have always had fairly strict censorship policies, especially when it comes to alcohol, nudity, drugs, religion, swearing and excessive violence, and often video game developers are asked to change or remove certain segments before they will accept it. But even Nintendo themselves are at fault of their own policies and have had to update or change their games before they can be distributed to the rest of the world. And today, me and Nathan Wooten from the YouTube channel of Woots, a channel known for its cool hacking videos, versus series and theories, are going to cover 10 games that have all been censored in some way, and right here on the Easter Egg Hunter. During the early 90s, it was DMA Design, who we all know as Rockstar North today, that brought us Lemmings. Yes, the puzzle adventure which had you trying to navigate most, if not all, these little creatures to the goals as quickly and as safely as possible. Anyway, every so often, particularly on the Super Nintendo port, animations would occur after completing the various difficulty levels, and while most of us were treated to this scene after taking care of the taxing stages, it was only in Japan where they received a rather different scene that Nintendo decided to censor.
Next up, we have two more Super Nintendo games, and while they are completely and utterly different titles, they do share something in common. Both of their intros were heavily watered down by Nintendo. First up, it's the Prince of Persia. In the Japanese version, our adventurer is seen winning the heart of the princess, but he is soon whisked away by the evil Grand Vizier's men, chained up and beaten senseless. Whereas for the rest of the world, this scene was completely removed. Meanwhile, in Desert Strike Return to the Gulf, the Sega Genesis version contained a scene that was deemed too graphic for Nintendo and depicts a guard dealing with a prisoner in a rather grim way. The scene, in fact, lasts for 30 seconds, whereas the Super Nintendo port only focused in on the prison for a third of the time.
Next up, it's my favourite Paper Mario, as it's the Thousand Year Door, a game filled with many secrets, Easter eggs and cool little references, but is also home to a number of scenes that had to be changed. Of course, the one that is most well known is hidden in the house located in the back alley of Rogueport, where for most of us we just stumble upon a bandit who has claimed this home as his hideout. But in the Japanese version, players were greeted to a crime scene featuring a chalked outline of a toad and blood that was splattered across the floor. And while there are a few other things that were removed from this title, the one thing I didn't know and only found out about the other day is that this gesture that Mario uses quite a lot during the opening 15 minutes was only removed from the European port, and that was mainly due to the fact it might have passed off as Mario portraying a Nazi salute.
Before Mario Kart 64 could be released into the PAL regions and America, it was Luigi Circuit that had to be altered before doing so, as there were cleverly designed advertising boards that surrounded the first bend, which included Yoshi 1, Luigi, Koopa Air, Shot, and Mario Row. And yes, they are a play on real-life brands that you might have typically seen at a racing circuit, such as Mobile One, Goodyear Tires, Shell, Arjip, and believe it or not, Marlboro cigarettes. Of course, most of us just saw these signs instead, as I'm sure Nintendo did not want any copyright issues or to be seen potentially advertising these brands, especially cigarettes, to their younger audience.
Then in 1992, it was Virgin Games USA who programmed RoboCop vs the Terminator, a game loosely based off the comic book series of the same name and brought with it all the action, adventure, revenge and violence you would typically associate with these two characters. And it seemed to deliver, especially in the violence department, since the Genesis version was presented with the bloodiest game award for 1993 by Electronic Gaming Monthly, and hardly surprising with all the exploding bodies backed up with the sloppy sound effects and screams of pain, plus the splatters of blood that were strewn across the windows for enemies that were attacking you from cover. But of course, these were slightly watered down in the Super Nintendo version, as enemies now explode into balls of fire rather than adding all the gruesome effects and details, and the blood decorating the windows was blackened instead.
Time for some Super Mario World now, and I bet many of you are thinking, what on earth is censored here? Well, let me tell ya, it comes down to our companion Yoshi, who can eat and devour just about anything, and some of the time provide you with a helpful item or special ability. However, in the Japanese version, when you reach Vanilla Secret 3, which is accessible via the Vanilla Dome, a level that is filled with dolphins that dart across the screen, which can definitely help you move across the level in a much safer way, that Yoshi can actually eat up as many dolphins as he wishes to, and will never actually provide Mario with anything in return. It is said that Nintendo decided to censor Yoshi's eating frenzy for the rest of the world due to controversial mass killings of dolphins and different views on those aquatic mammals. So what else did Nintendo find to censor upon the Super Nintendo? Well, let's take a trip to Ocean Software's amusing platform title, The Addams Family. Outside in the courtyard rests an old tree, home to an underground stage and a giant bird that has built its nest on top of it. The enemy can be defeated easily by carefully observing its pattern and jumping on top of its head 3 times, and eventually be rewarded with an extra heart container. While us Super Nintendo players saw this bird just squawking at us and moving from side to side, it was in the Sega Genesis port where players were treated to a few extra details. Most notably the fact that this bird was green and would have more of a strained face upon it. And that's because the bird in this version was allowed to try to poop on you.
Next up, we are checking in on the arcade and Nintendo 64 platforms of Cruisin USA, a game created and developed by Midway Games and published by Nintendo, but it was Williams who were in charge of the N64 port and had the job of censoring a few elements across a number of stages, to which some of the original team members were not happy with Nintendo for making them do so, particularly Eugene Jarvis, who is quoted as saying at the time, "It seems like they don't have any sense of humour. I don't know what's wrong with those people." Anyway, it is in Iowa that originally you could slam into animals that wandered across the road, which of course, yes, had to be censored. Then after winning a race, you are always greeted by Nutsa Hurling, who is wearing 2 different tops across the 2 platforms while she is presenting you with a trophy. Though the most interesting censored parts occur during the final race set in Washington DC, as when you enter the tunnel on the N64 version, you will notice the walls are lined with $100 bills sporting a picture of Benjamin Franklin. But in the arcade, this was actually an image of Hillary Clinton smoking a cigar. But even better was the fact that once you had completed the cruise, the game pans up to the top of the White House where Bill and Hillary Clinton and apparently Jennifer Flowers splash about together in a hot tub.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Cruisin USA! Come on down! I love this job!
For our final look at the bits that Nintendo censored, let's take a look at Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which was released on the Nintendo Switch in 2017 and introduced a few new characters, including the Inkling Girls from Splatoon, who were, unknowingly to Nintendo, actually portraying an action known as bras d'honneur when they hit another player with an item. Bras-d'honneur is an obscene gesture in which an arm is bent into an L shape with the closed palm pointing upward while the other hand grips the bicep of the bent arm. It conveys a sense of up yours or some other things that we would have to censor out of this video. But the gist of it is, it's the equivalent of giving someone the middle finger, and once Nintendo had realized this, they adjusted the offending animation in an update where now today the Inkling girls just hold up one arm instead of the gesture.